The restaurant buzzed with quiet energy, the soft clinking of cutlery and muted conversations creating a backdrop that felt both intimate and sophisticated. It was an upscale steakhouse, the kind of place where the aroma of seared meat mingled with the subtle scent of aged wood and polished leather. Among the diners that evening was Jonathan Holloway, a man whose name alone could open doors across continents. He was a billionaire, a tycoon whose ventures spanned industries from technology to real estate, and who rarely allowed anyone beyond his inner circle to see him outside of boardrooms and charity galas. Jonathan sat alone in a corner booth, lighting just dim enough to soften the sharp angles of his face. Despite his wealth, he was a quiet man, not prone to ostentation in his personal life. Tonight, however, he indulged in a rare pleasure, a perfectly cooked steak, a glass of vintage Cabernet, and a reprieve from the constant demands of his empire. He didn't particularly notice the other patrons or the occasional glances in his direction, accustomed as he was to being recognized. At the center of this scene was Lila Monroe, a waitress whose presence commanded respect without demanding attention. Lila had worked at the restaurant for years, known among her colleagues for her calm efficiency and innate warmth. She moved gracefully between tables, balancing plates and wine glasses with practiced ease, her dark skin glowing softly under the warm restaurant lighting. She was observant, the kind of person who noticed the subtleties in a person's behavior, the slight slump of a shoulder, the hesitation in a glance. That evening, as fate would have it, Jonathan's order coincided with a particularly hectic service period. Lila approached his table with her usual poise, presenting the steak with a gentle smile. Jonathan looked up, his eyes meeting hers for a brief moment. There was a quiet recognition in her gaze, a human connection that transcended the formalities of her role. As Jonathan prepared to dig into his meal, a small mishap occurred. A splash of sauce from the steak landed on the pristine white of his shirt. For many, this might have been a minor inconvenience, barely worth noting. For someone like Jonathan, whose life was meticulously curated, it was an irritation, momentary disruption in an otherwise controlled world. Without a word, Lila reached into her apron and handed him a handkerchief, soft and freshly pressed. Her gesture was simple, devoid of any airs, yet it carried an unexpected weight. Jonathan froze for a heartbeat, something in the gesture halting the flow of his usual decisiveness. It was not the handkerchief itself that caught him off guard, but the quiet dignity and thoughtfulness with which it was offered. He looked at it. Lila really looked at her, for the first time, not as a waitress fulfilling a role, but as a person, a human being extending care without expectation. The restaurant around them seemed to fade, the clatter of cutlery and murmurs of other patrons receding into insignificance. In that moment, Jonathan found himself at a rare loss for words, a feeling so alien that it startled him. Lila, unaware of the storm she had inadvertently stirred, continued with her duties, moving through the restaurant with her usual rhythm. She did not linger, did not attempt to capitalize on the reaction she had evoked. Yet the impact of her simple gesture lingered far longer than either of them could have anticipated. Jonathan's mind, normally a whirlwind of strategies and plans, stilled. He thought of his life, of the board meetings, the acquisitions, the headlines that often celebrated him but never revealed him. He realized, perhaps for the first time in years, how rarely he allowed himself to witness genuine, uncalculated human kindness. He had been so accustomed to people responding to his wealth, to his influence, that he had forgotten how disarming a small act of decency could be. In the days that followed, Jonathan could not shake the memory of Lila's handkerchief, and the understated elegance with which she offered it became more than an incident in a restaurant. It became a symbol of something he had long neglected, the raw simplicity of human interaction. He found himself reflecting not on the loss of control that moment represented, but on the clarity it brought. There were moments in life that no amount of money could orchestrate, moments of connection, recognition, and mutual respect that could not be bought or manufactured. Out of this reflection came action. Jonathan began to reconsider the ways in which he interacted with the world, not merely as a businessman, but as a person. He sought opportunities to support initiatives that celebrated dignity and human kindness. He became involved in programs that promoted equality, education, and mentorship, often quietly and without fanfare, inspired by a singular moment that reminded him of his own humanity. As for Leela, she continued her work, unaware of the profound ripple her gesture had created. To her it was merely part of the service, a routine performed with professionalism and grace. Yet in the quiet corners of Jonathan's life, that evening remained vivida, testament to the subtle power of empathy, to the ways in which one small act can resonate far beyond its immediate context. The story of that night would never make headlines. It was too intimate, too human to be commodified by the media. But for those involved, it became a defining memory, a reminder that even in a world often dominated by wealth and status, the simplest acts of care could leave an indelible mark. In the intersection of their worlds, one billionaire and one waitress shared a fleeting yet transformative moment that underscored a truth often overlooked, that dignity, kindness, and recognition are priceless, and sometimes the smallest gestures speak louder than any fortune. Years later, when asked about the pivotal moments that shaped his outlook on life, Jonathan would recall the night a handkerchief was handed to him across a dimly lit steakhouse table. He would not remember the exact cut of steak or the label of the wine, but he would remember the quiet presence of a woman who reminded him of what truly mattered. And in remembering, he would smile not at the grandeur of his accomplishments, but at the simplicity of a human connection that had, in a moment, brought him to silence.